Good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us on this virtual edition of MedTalks. We're calling it COVID-19 Anxiety, Cultivating Our Collective Resilience. This virtual broadcast is made possible by many wonderful individuals and with the financial support, as always, of our good friends at the Sunshine Coast Credit Union. My name is Joanna Piros. I'm coming to you today from beautiful downtown Gibsons. I'm proud to be on the board of the Sechelt Hospital Foundation and prouder still to be part of this afternoon's very important undertaking. We want to be talking about one of the most significant and scary aspects of the COVID crisis, and that's the impact on our mental health and well-being. You've probably noticed it for yourself, in yourself and in conversations with others, that every day seems to have a little bit of an undertone of fear. So fear of contagion for ourselves and for our families, fear of economic catastrophe, which is certainly a possibility, and then fear of the unknown, right? These are all scary things. And then there's the isolation. Let's face it, we are social animals. We were not cut out to be cut off. So all of these things are having an impact on our lives. But the good news is, and there is good news, there are so many things that we can do for ourselves and for each other. We are not alone. So to give you some tools to stay mentally and emotionally balanced, we have three fantastically skilled professionals with us today, all logging in from their respective workplaces. They're going to speak to you and answer your questions. Please use the chat feature in YouTube to type in a question. We will collect those, curate those, and attempt to answer as many of them as possible. Probably somewhere around 1:30, 1:40, or rather 2:30, 2:40, that sort of thing. So we're very fortunate to have three remarkable humans speaking to us today, all of them Sunshine Coasters, by the way. Dr. Ral Gupta works as an integrative medical physician, professional coach, and mindfulness instructor. Dr. Lisa Kitt is a registered psychologist who specializes in traumatic stress and related mental health injuries. And Dr. Marius Velgemood is the Vancouver Coastal Health Medical Manager for Mental Health and Substance Use Services on the Sunshine Coast. And he's also Psychiatry Lead for Geriatric Psychiatry and Adult Community Support Services. You will hear from all of them, but Raul, would you like to kick us off, please?
Sure. Thank you so much, Joanna, for the introduction. So yes, my name is Raul, and I live here in Gibsons, where I work as a physician, and I've been in medicine for about 25 years. And I really have been transitioning my career and my skills and roles towards primarily working now to cultivate resilience and support people around their own mental health challenges. And that's both for patients that are referred by their family doctor. It's also for healthcare providers around the province. And I do like to work with people both one-on-one as well as in groups, because I think there's something really powerful about us coming together in that way. We're all going to go about in a moment to share a little bit about ourselves and one thing we're grateful for. And so I want to take this opportunity to be grateful for the Sechelt Hospital Foundation, as well as the Sunshine Coast COVID Physician Task Force. Both of these groups are working tremendously hard to support us as a community. And it's one of the gifts actually that have come out of this is these relationships that are forming, because these are really challenging times, as Joanna mentioned. And so I want to start off by saying, if you're not feeling okay today, that's okay. These are really difficult times. I read an article recently where the author said something like, no sane person would feel good during a global pandemic. And from that place, we can actually be grateful for the discomfort of our sanity. And so our hope is really to create an environment where we can navigate these challenges together, where we can breathe together, where we can reflect together, where we can take care of ourselves, take care of each other, and perhaps most of all, feel a sense of collective resilience. So just one thing to say about the audience. We anticipate that it's a pretty broad audience that's joining us today. So just to say, that could be healthcare workers or other people providing essential services who are managing very difficult conditions. Could be people who are in self-isolation or self-quarantine and managing that challenge. People who are maybe staying at home for the betterment of our society, but meeting very specific challenges for that too. People who are staying at home to be with their kids and having their kids not be at school, and suddenly very different routines. People that maybe are experiencing significant financial challenges already, either losing their jobs or finding new ways to find their income, and maybe even having some housing issues. So we recognize there's a wide variety of people that might be joining this call. And our hope is to look at issues that are more broad and hopefully speak to experiences that we're all facing. So I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Lisa Kitt to maybe say a little bit about yourself and maybe continue to set the stage for us today.
Sounds good. Thanks, Raul. That was a great introduction. To the audience, you're going to notice some themes that we're going to repeat, especially probably Raul and I, as we go through. And one of them is to just be able to show up as you are. We're doing that today. We're all in this together. So I'm a psychologist. I'm up in Half Moon Bay today. And I spend a lot of time thinking about how to keep human beings, how to keep ourselves well, particularly during times of trauma and stress. And this is certainly one of those times. There's a lot going on for everybody right now, and we're sharing in this really unprecedented time. And just so to be able to just notice how you are and be how you are right now, I just want to really honor. I spend a lot of time in that place of understanding people's resilience at times of stress, thinking a lot about the role of emotion. And so over the many coming weeks, we're going to be with you guys on Tuesdays at 2:00. You're going to hear from me talking a lot about the role of emotions and the importance of acknowledging and being with and moving. Emotions love to move, just like my hand's going to move a lot, I think, in this broadcast. And so to honor our emotions, however you're showing up, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. I also, if we're going to think about resilience, the other thing I tend to stress a lot is that resilience and thriving in adversity isn't a do-it-yourself project. This is really about connection, about community, coming together, and finding places of meaning. This isn't just about happiness. It's about acknowledging all of those emotions and trying to find ways to do that with each other. In terms of gratitude, I'm really grateful for my colleagues to be able to do this. The three of us haven't known each other that long, actually, virtually. We've had some connections with patients and with clients. If we're going to talk about meaning and resilience, I get a lot of meaning about from important, depth-oriented conversations with people who spark my imagination and creativity. And I love sharing that in a wider audience. And so for me, this conversation about mental health and emotional and psychological health is really, really important. And I'm feeling a lot of gratitude. And I think it's going to spark my resilience, actually, to have this dialogue with this panel and with all of you in the community. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see how this goes. Thanks, guys. Marius, over to you.
Good afternoon from my side. I can tell you one thing. Part of this project. I am grateful to be part of this project. For those of you that don't know me, I have a challenging last name. And if I say Dr. W, more people will know whom I'm talking about. So my name is Marcus, and a psychiatrist at Sechelt Hospital here in this community now for 5 years. And it's been a beautiful 5 years. It's been a tremendous experience. If I think about what I've learned during these 5 years, I cannot express it in words. What I'm most excited about is about connecting. I am excited about getting right into your house, there where you are listening to us talking away. It is about reducing that sense of loneliness. You know, in this time, I see people struggle. I see people struggle because we don't know where to go. We don't know who can we ask. It's like we're each of us, we feel like we're in this alone, but on the contrary, we are not. We are in this together. And building this collective strength is tremendous. It is powerful, it is meaningful, and therefore we will have this conversation on a weekly basis. I am grateful for the people who made this possible. As a psychiatrist, I'm always drawn to sort of science and biology, and I want to think about the different circuits running in our brains. I can tell you one thing for sure, and that is that the anxiety circuit has been lit up in this world because of the adversity that we're facing. But after this discussion today, that circuit will hopefully be dampened down a bit as you get a sense of hope and to reduce human that matters to me. And we are going to be focusing on exactly that. So I thought about starting this conversation just by asking my panel colleagues here just what are the things we've been to address and connect with primarily, and then this will go farther and wider to a bigger audience. But let's talk about what's happening here on the Sunshine Coast. So Raul, if I can ask you one or two things that you've been seeing, Lisa.
Sure, I'm happy to speak to, I think with our topic today around anxiety, some of the ways that I've seen anxiety showing up are difficulty sleeping. I've seen people talk about waking up at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning and not being able to get back to sleep, or not even being able to fall asleep in the first place. And then all the fret about not sleeping and what's that going to do to my mind. And I've been experiencing that within myself, so I know exactly what that feels like. And then that can feed into a sense of the mind not being focused, and then having difficulty concentrating on what I need to do next. And then I can start to beat myself up about it. So I've been hearing that from other people, is like they're expecting themselves to be able to be functioning at the same level they used to function at, and that's really, really hard to do. Lisa, anything that comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I think, what am I not seeing? I'm seeing some massive range of responses. Everyone is having some kind of stress response. I really want to normalize that. That stress response looks different in everyone. There's some generalizations that we can talk about, but I think everybody is having some sort of stress response. And that shows up in different ways in people's bodies. And so, Raul, you were talking some about the anxiety symptoms. Yeah, more irritability, difficulty sleeping. Anybody having difficulty with productivity and concentration? I certainly am myself at times. And so just the nervous system, when it's feeling more stress, gets overreactive. And so how that shows up in your body and in your mind and in your emotions is something. We don't have those coping strategies right now that we often rely on. Distraction, just getting out, being social, being with people, just getting away from your family sometimes is a really helpful strategy. And you can't do that right now in the same ways. I think of mental health and responses on a continuum. And so I think we're all having a stress response, but I'm also seeing in people who were suffering before with underlying mental health and nervous system issues, I'm seeing more stress response in those folks. So lots of trauma symptoms are coming up that may have been settled before in people. They're igniting, their nervous systems are more dysregulated now. And so I'm really worried about those folks as they sit at home in isolation. Because remember, resilience is about connection. And so I really worry about the physical and for some people, the social isolation that's coming from this. But those folks are having more acute sort of trauma symptoms showing up in their bodies. And maybe this is somewhere we can go after this, and hopefully it comes up in questions, but I'm also seeing connection in really creative, beautiful ways, whether that's on just chats, text chats of people connecting and coming together, old school phone trees of people checking in with each other, creative dinner time happy hours or board games over Zoom. I'm seeing lots of just sort of neat connections on the other side. So on the flip side of the mental health stress, I'm also seeing this beautiful connection in people. What are you seeing, Marius?
You know what I want to add at this stage is I'll pick up on Raul, your comment about people not sleeping and feeling anxious about various things, and then feeling anxious about feeling anxious, not sleeping, and then lying awake thinking I should be sleeping, I shouldn't be sleeping. I want to just bring one point across very clearly at this stage. The uncertainty and the anxiety that you're facing is normal, right? There is such a thing as a normal anxiety response. It is not pathological. You're sitting in your house, you're thinking to yourself, I'm feeling all these things, I'm going through all these things. What does it even mean? Doesn't mean there's something wrong with me. Doesn't mean I need to necessarily get help. I want to motivate you in saying that for now, a lot of uncertainty and fear responses will be present. And you're going to have to start to interrupt some of those thought patterns. We talked a little bit about the use of social media in the recent past, and how easily you can be bombarded with lots and lots of information, sometimes meaningless information. And you're just getting your system overloaded with so much information, and you don't know how to work with that after a while. So it's about that purposeful, meaningful connecting that needs to continue. And when that uncertainty comes and you feel like the isolation is too much, to reach out. Do not sit on your own, suffering on your own. We all are in the same boat here. If you reach out to a neighbor saying, you know what, I'm just feeling so uncertain today, it's not strange. It's huge. It's normal. People feel that way for now. So of course we have a vulnerable population that maybe suffer from a pre-existing condition. For these individuals, it might be so much worse at the moment. To have this added layer of stress and discomfort on top of the existing difficulty. And it is essential that we stay connected. We were not made to be isolated. And we should not confuse physical distancing with emotional distancing, social distancing. We should still be reaching out. We should still be connecting. We should be able to tolerate each other better during this time. Thank you so much for all my colleagues tolerating in the last while. We should be able to really apply our minds to create space for one another, to share these experiences. So when it comes to those, Lisa, you were talking about the stress levels, the anxiety levels, that's just up. Yes, it is up, and it's going to be up because of uncertainty. Mm-hmm. But there will be a tomorrow again. I can tell you without a doubt that the stresses we're facing now will pass too. But we are in it now, and we need to find a way to deal with it right now. And that is why we're excited about having this discussion. So those levels of anxiety, you can work on bringing them down little bits by starting to catch your thoughts. What is it that I'm thinking about? Raul, now I know you work a lot with mindfulness, what people think about. You know, what is it that's happening in your thoughts? Be aware of it. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that.
Sure. Well, and maybe just before jumping into that, as you were speaking, Marius, one thing that I was noticing myself was actually some surprise that I was making assumptions about who would be functioning well and who would be functioning more, having more challenge. And I've been really surprised that it's so unpredictable. Like all of us are going to have different responses, and some people that I thought might struggle actually were finding some resources and finding some ease. And other people that were actually normally functioning really well are already having a difficult time. And so we can easily fall into these assumptions about our own capacity and other people's capacity. And part of our job now is to just meet each other as where we are and see if we can drop our assumptions, drop our judgments, our expectations of each other, and meet each other as humans. And I think this speaks a little bit to what mindfulness really can support us around, because I think one of the knee-jerk reflexes we have within us to any kind of stress is to turn away from it, is to either ignore it or suppress it or deny it or try to control it somehow. And so some of us are going to overdrive to try to control every aspect of our life, and other people are denying that there's even a problem. And mindfulness is one strategy that can help us find the courage, find the ability to turn towards that which is a little bit uncomfortable, that which is challenging. And we can do it in ways that are kind, that are patient. It's really about bringing a certain love for oneself that enables us to be in relationship with that which is difficult. And therefore, we can actually start to see the habit patterns of our mind. We can start to see what's going on with us emotionally. We can see what's going on for us physically. And we're in a much better place to initiate self-care. We're in a much better place to meet ourselves with kindness. And we're in a much better place then to actually relate to other people from a place of a deeper truth in terms of how we're doing.
Well, that statement that you just made about, sometimes one person feels strong and at another time another person feels strong. We should also be aware of and recognize that in ourselves, sometimes we're going to feel strong. We're going to feel confident. And it's like, we've got this. Just to feel in the next moment, just to feel like, what the heck is happening? I'm feeling all confused. So those fluctuations just within yourself is going to happen, and therefore we need so much patience. Now Lisa is the expert on emotion and patience and how we should create that space for each other. So that is such a crucial thing.
As I hear you, it is so normal and really healthy, actually, to allow ourselves to feel that full range of affect. The goal here is not, resilience doesn't come from, and the goal isn't just happiness, right? That's not what makes healthy human beings. Healthy human beings have that really full range. So that means we're going, when it's happening in our bodies and in our nervous systems, to allow ourselves to feel that grief, despair, sadness, fear. That facilitates also being able to feel those beautiful moments of joy and connection and love and surprise and sparkle and all those really endorphin driven emotions that we want to feel. And so from an emotions perspective, right now, it might feel like it's all over the place. And that's totally normal and important. If our goal at the end of this, whatever that is, and we don't know, is to not have an injury, a psychological injury, because of the state we're in right now in the world, really.
When we look at this whole thing that we're all going through, and we look at the fact that one of the things we want people to remember is that we need to get through this emotionally sound. We don't want people to come out on the other side being affected by trauma to the point of it becoming pathological.
Exactly.
And one of the major things that we can do is connectedness. That's the one thing that we can all hang on to, hold on to, and force our ways into a place of being connected. And one of the things that I'm learning in this time is I'm learning purposeful connection. You know, when life continues as per usual and there's no adversity and you can do whatever, whenever, it's almost like connection can be so platonic. But we find ourselves in a place where we are purposefully connecting. And it's a very interesting phenomena that I haven't thought about much in my life. But those people that matter to you in your world, your existence, those are the people that you are reaching out to now. Those are the people you're making sure you're connected with. And Lisa, that's just amazing.
I love what you just said about the importance of vulnerability right now in those safe connection places to really show and share who you are with other people. That's sparky. That does something to us. We're wired for connection. And so that's so important from a resilience perspective. Yeah, that was really beautifully said, Marius. I totally agree.
You know, as you're speaking about that, Lisa, I think that's one of the things that we can offer each other is that presence. I think sometimes when people are sharing their vulnerability, we can get into trying to fix their problem or trying to give them some advice. And I think right now, actually, it's a wonderful opportunity just to create the spaces for each other to share our experience and have that be enough. And there's such a gift when we can honor that, share in that space. That itself is incredibly healing, I think. And of course, we need to make sure we do it with people that we trust, people that have, that deserve that level of our honesty with each other.
Yeah, we can risk it a little bit right now too, right?
Yeah.
Maybe push ourselves towards connection where we wouldn't before. Yeah.
So that realness is something that I'm very interested in, and that realness is something that is very unique in the sense of it feels like you're exposing yourself a little bit. By talking about your weaknesses, by looking by talking about the things that you struggle with.
Mm-hmm.
We all have this persona that we have to keep up in life. We all have a certain sort of standard by which we live our lives, and sometimes that can be pretty separated from the reality of what we're feeling. So during this time, we're working on the front lines, my colleagues that do, I see them being honest, I see them being real, and I see the tremendous power in realness. And Raul, you said a very important thing here is that realness should be shared in a place where it's safe. You have to have that place where you connect in a meaningful way when you share that realness. And Lisa, you added stepping out a little bit, and that's excellent. That's wonderful. This is the time we find ourselves in. We're in an uncertain time. There is no script. We cannot find any guidelines to read on how to live through this adversity. But there are certain principles in our humanness that will get us through this, and that resilience is what we're focusing on today. That's why we're talking about. This is why we are showing you a little bit of our realness today. You know, I can openly and honestly say, I look at the numbers, I look at the statistics, and I think to myself, what is coming next? Mm-hmm. That's a very real emotion. That's an anxiety emotion. That's fear. But I do not allow myself to be overcome by that. I use that as information to make sound decisions, but I do not allow that to create an inner state of fearfulness and anxiety. So again, that brings us to the question of what are we allowing? What type of information are we allowing into our minds, and what do we do with that? So we connected a little bit about how to use social media in a sound way. It's a wonderful tool, but wow, it can be overwhelming at times.
Yeah, it's both, isn't it? It's a place of connection for a lot of people right now, but we really have to monitor what we're watching and how much. And that's going to be everybody, right? Depending on what's going on in yourself and in your own nervous system. Some people can tolerate a lot of news. Some people shouldn't be watching it at all if it really dysregulates them. And so this whole social media thing is interesting for me because it is a place of connection. I think we could be even more creative with it and find those places and those groups where people can connect with vulnerability even more than we already are. But I do worry about the negativity and the fear, the anxiety, really, that can come with it. Go ahead, Raul.
Well, I was just thinking one of the things that I've been doing, and I'll be full disclosure, I never used WhatsApp before Marius introduced me to it, and so I've been a bit of a social media Luddite, if I could say, and so I'm exploring ways that it can be useful. And one of the things that I'm finding useful is to find times in the course of the day where I'm going to unplug. And I'm going to choose not to go into social media for say 2 or 3 hours before I want to sleep.
Yeah.
And have some structured routine around my day about how I might get useful information that I want to stay informed about changing guidelines and what's happening in my community, especially certainly around the world, but containing it and finding how I might do that in a way that works for me. And I find that's a really important part of this.
Yeah, well said. Boundaries around what's good for you.
Absolutely. When I look at the way that we enter, what we do with information, if I look at treating a certain condition, there are thousands and thousands of studies out there, and every different institution or group wants to bring their treatment modality. We have to be able to filter through information, get the real meaningful parts out of it. Like watching this broadcast today is a meaningful way of using social media. Mm-hmm. But you have to find that space that is comfortable for you. Do not engage things that are meaningless that just create anxiety. I see that all the time. I'm so aware of people spending time with anxiety-provoking material. Rather go for factual information, apply the information wisely, as we are doing in our community. And let me tell you one thing, just as a side note here. I love this community. I love the Sunshine Coast. I love how people are just doing their part and how they're putting in effort. And it's absolutely amazing. I told you that the past 5 years of my life has been amazing. And this coast is absolutely stunning in the way that it's adhering to some of the guidelines. This is a wise use of information. Don't allow yourself to be bombarded by senseless information that creates anxiety. And you have to have that in your head going to bed tonight, and you lie awake wondering what it all means. And so that's just one practical thing. One of the things we can do.
And you're bringing up just what the physicians, the task force, I really appreciate that they're very regularly offering some updates to our community through the Coast Reporter that I actually read it every day that they put it out, because I learned some very specific key messages about what I need to know. And so I encourage those that haven't had a chance to check that out as a place to get reliable information that's directly from those that are working really hard in our community to keep us safe.
And every time I see people come to the table with creativity, I see the artists in our community coming out, creating stuff. I see the community get together, like making things for the frontline workers to protect their health. I see people supplying food to those in need. I see people helping out everywhere. And you know what? That's very therapeutic. If you find yourself being very anxious and isolated, finding that way that you can help someone else is very therapeutic, not only to yourself, but indeed to the person you're helping. And that's very powerful.
I love that. One of the antidotes, I think, to anxiety is engagement and anxiety, and empathy, right? Reaching out from a place of compassion and with empathetic engagement. That's really hard to do when you're highly anxious. And so, but sometimes to actually do the behaviors and put yourself out there to think about other people will actually bring down our anxious states. And so it's a really helpful thing to do if you're able.
So that anxiety wants to shut you down. Remember, that's what anxiety does. It shuts you down. It breaks everything about you. Your concentration is poor. You're not connecting. You're socially withdrawing. You're constantly on the edge. You feel like your body is uptight and something dreadful is going to happen. But by breaking out of that pattern, by using behaviors, reaching out to other people, that is amazing. Nothing short of amazing. And do it. Step out of your comfort zone. Do it once or twice. Find a way, and you'll see.
Go ahead. I was just going to actually turn it to you. There's some other ways to break anxiety, and one of them is through a mindfulness practice.
Thank you. I was actually just thinking the same thing, that I'm kind of aware of the time, and it'd be nice to get to some of the questions that people might be posing. And we had thought that maybe a nice transition to that is to take a few minutes actually for us to practice exactly that, because it's easy for us to get hijacked by anxiety. Would that be okay if we take a few minutes as a group, all of those listening, to just take a few moments now where we can practice tuning into this moment? And while we do that, it's really inviting certain qualities of kindness, of patience with ourselves, of treating this moment as if it's never actually happened before. And this collection of people, both that we can see and those that are listening, have never assembled before. So this is an entirely fresh moment, and none of us know exactly what's going to happen next. And so these are some moments where we can actually cultivate our ability to be with the unknown and really carve a new relationship with life, really, as it's unfolding. So there are I'd say there's two gifts that are present all the time that all of us can connect to. And one of them is the force of gravity. So I'm going to invite you just to take a moment and let yourself feel the places where you can make a connection with the ground, with your chair, if you're lying down with your bed or couch, and actually just notice the way that the earth right now is holding us. And feel that sense of being held. And that how it actually always is a support that's with us. And so as you do that, you might even notice that you could relax a little bit into that hold. So just kind of letting ourselves maybe take some of the armor off that we might be wearing as we kind of keep ourselves braced for what might happen next. And notice, wow, in this moment, there's actually nothing for us to do, but simply an opportunity to be with things as they are. And then the other gift is our breath. Each of us have a breath that's been with us from day one. So it's a reliable friend, actually, that knows how to breathe our bodies. And as we tune in, we probably can easily notice that one thing we're all doing is holding our breath collectively. So we could actually take some time now to choose a different kind of breath. And so I'm going to invite you to maybe just let yourself breathe a little bit more deeply into maybe your belly. and just letting yourself have your exhalation be a little bit slower, a little bit deeper. And you can do this with your eyes open or your eyes closed, depending on what supports you in tuning in. And as you do this, you might even notice if there's a part of your body that wants to relax. So maybe it's like letting your shoulders roll back or letting your jaw unclench. For me, it's kind of letting my hands open rather than being in kind of little fists. So however you might notice there's a place in your body where you could notice there's no need to fight or flee anything right now. Just a chance to take in how you are and see if you can make space for whatever you find without needing to judge it or have it be separate from the moment. So just a few deeper breaths, feeling the ground, and then if you want, with your eyes open, maybe just making sure you can notice where you are. So see if you could even name for yourself 2 or 3 things that are in your visual field, whether it's, for me right now, I'm looking out a window, I can see Mount Elphinstone and see the snow that's still on it. I can see a bit of wind that's in one of the trees outside my window. I notice this glass of water that's calling my name. Maybe you have a pet that's in your vicinity that's wanting a little bit of a tactile connection right now. So just anything that's for you, around you, and possibly even supports you in a willingness to be here. Supports you in feeling connected to yourself, to each other. And maybe just 1 or 2 final breaths where we can appreciate this breath that connects us. Connects us to each other and connects us to the world around us.
That was lovely.
Absolutely. Raul, can we do this 3 times a day? Will you live stream on Facebook?
I was going to say on WhatsApp, no problem.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's excellent.
Mm-hmm.
This reduces a lot of the traffic that's happening in your mind. It reduces a lot of the neuroendocrine stress hormones, and it has a direct impact on how we feel, how grounded we are, and how we relate. And we can never underestimate the importance of such an activity. So thank you all. Much appreciated.
I'm going to throw in one little other piece of science. We'll do little bits each week, I'm thinking. But anxiety takes us into sympathetic nervous system arousal. That's its job, fight or flight. It's a safety mechanism, really. And so when we don't want to be in that place, the parasympathetic system is what helps us relax, be in our bodies, tell ourselves we're not in fear, that we're safe. And I certainly, in that mindfulness exercise that you just led, really felt my parasympathetic engage, started to work in a stronger way. I felt myself melt into my body more. Definitely, shoulders came down, breath expanded, and I'm smiling. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that.
So maybe maybe I'll jump back in here if I may, because I know that we have some questions have been coming in. First of all, I'd like to really thank you for that concept of we are collectively holding our breaths, because that is so true. The entire world is holding its breath, wondering what comes next. And the idea of turning that around to say, but we can all breathe together, I think is really beautiful and really powerful. So thank you for that. I would like to loop in now Jane McDonald, who is the Executive Director of the Sechelt Hospital Foundation. And Jane has been busily curating and collecting questions that are being typed into the chat window. And so I'll throw it over to Jane so she can maybe throw out a few questions, and then the panelists just jump in wherever you want to respond to those. Jane, how about that? Unmute. There she is.
Nope. We might be making up questions, which is just fine.
No?
Oh,
now,
yeah.
there you are. Yes, thank you.
That's great.
That's a source of anxiety right there.
Let's do a breathing exercise.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get to the questions. We have one from the audience saying, in addition to my own struggles with this new way of living, I notice a drastic change in my kids' behavior. How can I help them when my own bucket is already overflowing?
Great question.
Mm-hmm.
We should do a whole week on that.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we can sort of touch on just today, and I agree with you, Lisa, we should make this one of our themes in the weeks to come.
Yeah.
But one of the things we have to realize today is that our kids don't have the capacity to understand in the same way as we do. So our kids can sometimes be overwhelmed, but when they just hear about all the chaos that's happening around us. But yet they also need to know what's happening because there's a certain way of behaving that is indicated at the moment. So each parent will know where their kid is at. You know your child's ability to understand, and you know how to bring them a message that is very clear, but not anxiety provoking. They don't need to necessarily understand the full emotional impact of what you're sharing. And that is extremely important because the kids are vulnerable to anxiety. And we don't want unnecessary anxiety pathways running in their brains, but they also need to know what's happening. So that is a very unique question, and people will be met at different levels, and it's almost like a unique dynamic that will be present between you and your child when it comes to that matter. Now I know we've just been addressing one part of the question. The other part of the question is, how do I reach out to my kid when I'm feeling I'm running on empty?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would.
Well, I was just going to share that there's the Child and Youth Mental Health and Substance Use Community of Practice has put together a wonderful resource, and I believe it's going to be one of the resources that we can share with you at the end. But it's a wonderful document that really talks about the different signs that you might experience your kids going through that are signs that they're actually having a difficult time. It also shares with you some basic tips around creating some structure, especially when kids may not have the normal structures that they are used to, finding some routines with the family that could really be new ones that can help them settle into something, and then really speaking a language that supports their development level. And so finding the language around how we might communicate these truths and share details with them, and trusting actually that they have the ability to understand if it's at a level that's conducive to where they're at themselves. I think that's a really important part of it. And then that role of that part about when we're ourselves not our best, I think that really speaks to how important it is that we do take the time for our own self-care, even if we feel guilty about it, because perhaps the most important thing that kids are experiencing is us being role models. And that's not to put more pressure on us to be perfect, but more to give us permission to actually do what we need to take care of ourselves. I worked with one person this past week who was dealing with that exact issue. And when we came to what she needed to feel capable to meet the moment, it was, I need to carve out 3 times a day, 20 minutes where I'm not on, where I can either walk down to the water, where I can do a bit of yoga, where I could just write in my journal. And that actually would allow me to be the kind of parent that I want to be. Even if it's just like 10% less aroused, that's better than where we might, find ourselves typically.
Yeah, that's well said.
Go ahead, Lisa. I know you want to.
That's well said. I was going to say a really similar thing. One is that I think it's really important that in our own anxiety, again, when we're in our own anxiety, we have less empathy, a capacity for empathy, including for our children, or maybe especially for our children. It's hard. But to somehow remember in those conversations what's developmentally appropriate. Marius, that's what you were talking about. And so kids don't need to know too much. We often tell them from a place of anxiety what's going on and overshare. We don't need to do that right now. They need safety. And that is real. So this is hard. Being a parent of 2 teens right now is hard. I don't want to sugarcoat this at all for people. We're in the same house all the time. And so there's some good days where we're figuring it out and some really hard days. And so to normalize that, and the only thing I think we know how to do is to regulate ourselves. So again, that's hard too. But your point around self-care, or ensuring that our nervous systems are doing the best they can in this really difficult time, I think is the best strategy. If our goal is to provide safety for our kids. I worry a lot about kids right now from a lot of different perspectives. When homes aren't safe, this is a really dangerous time for kids. So I do a lot of thinking and sitting in the grief around that right now. But it's also a time where some families are coming together and finding new ways to have relationships, even in this struggle. And I think that's lovely, actually. Yeah.
Okay, we have another question, and it's one on how to deal with a loved one who has dementia, who continuously forgets the precautions that we're all being asked to take.
Marius, this one's for you.
I can jump in there. One of the important things is patience with a capital P. Wow. It'll require never-ending patience, because at the best of times, there's a lot of structure required. There's a lot of reminding that has to happen. Now, when you add a layer of anxiety for what happens when my loved one gets it wrong, what can the possible health implications be? And that brings an element of fear to the disorganized behavior that someone with an advanced neurocognitive disorder might be engaged in. So now more so than ever, simple, basic communications remain essential. I am talking about someone that is significantly affected by a neurocognitive disorder. Keeping those instructions clear, don't complicate matters, and be very consistent, and do it in a loving way, because these are beautiful people. They feel the emotional tone of our communication, and that can dictate and direct behavior tremendously. So basic, consistent approach, clear instruction, repeat, repeat, repeat.
There's a point that just came to my mind that actually relates to the last question and this one, and that is that emotion is contagious, right? And so if we're having these situations and dealing, helping people manage in our lives when we're really, really escalated and nervous system aroused, that's very, very contagious. That fear, that anxiety is contagious. So to do our best, even though this is hard, I'm not saying it's easy, to bring ourselves down and have those conversations in a patient, calm way is really important and hard.
And if I could just add to that, because I love what you guys are saying about it, it's just that piece around compassion. So we do the best we can. And sometimes things are going to happen that are less optimal in terms of safety. And we do our best and just trust that that's enough. And part of that is actually accepting that there's going to be some risks that we all are facing in lots of different situations. And then our job is really to just trust ourselves, have compassion for ourselves and for those that we're taking care of.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a few questions about the 3 a.m. sleeping mantra that possibly you could suggest. What to do when we wake up in the middle of the night and it seems that our thoughts are racing, and any suggestions on how we can really access our best selves so that we can get the rest that we need?
Yes, I'm excited about this question. Can I jump in?
Yeah, that's all jump into this one. This is a good one.
So one of the things that I find extremely practical and valuable in life is to question the content of what you're thinking. You know, you don't always have to change the theme that is happening in your mind, but you can question the words that you're using. So for example, if say the thought that's running in your head is, I have to be home all the time. I have to be home all the time. How am I going to do this? By using that same stream of thought, but changing it slightly to include something like, I get to be home all the time. I get to spend time with the people that I love. Yes, they are driving me crazy, but I do get to spend time with them. If you are in financial difficulty and you wake up, how am I going to pay the bills? Change that thought ever so slightly and start thinking about how am I going to review all the options that the government is making available to help me? How am I going to look at at engaging in those different measures that are out there. So you don't always have to change what you're thinking, because our minds have a way of staying on the topic that it wants to explore. But it's about changing the words just to bring somewhat more of a problem-solving aspect to it. And you will see that there's an emotion that flows with it. You're not going to sleep when your anxiety is flooding your brain. It's not going to happen. But by changing the words ever so slightly, can create a very different emotional atmosphere.
You know, I love that way of thinking about it, Marius, and I had a few other ideas to that. One is, again, just recognizing that it's normal right now to maybe have sleepless nights, and so maybe reducing our expectations of ourselves, and maybe reducing the amount of productivity that we're expecting from ourselves right now can be helpful as well. The other thing that I personally found helpful is to just ask myself, like, what stimulants am I taking? How much coffee or tea am I drinking, or even alcohol? And are there ways to kind of lower that kind of arousal within my system just to support my ability to sleep at night? And of course, because mindfulness is one of the things that I feel very passionate about, we're going to share with you lots of different recordings, mindfulness recordings, and actually just doing a scan of your body as an example. When you can't sleep, sometimes I'll do that. I'll just kind of go through my body part by part and actually just feel the different sensations that are here. And there's something about that that gets us out of our mind a little bit and brings us into the moment. And if we are tired, sometimes we just get to like the left arm and suddenly we're falling asleep. And so there's lots of different ways we can play with that. And above all, bringing some compassion for ourselves.
Great. Lots of lovely thoughts. The 3 a.m. wake up is classic trauma wake up. People are like, why am I up at 3? I'm like, it's a stress hormone racing through your body. And a 3 a.m. is sort of between 2 and 4, but is a classic sort of PTSD trauma response. And so some skills around it is to slow down, try to drop the content, either change the content, as Marius was sort of some of the words, but I like try to drop the content, slow down, and come into your body and notice what you notice. Try to engage that parasympathetic nervous system through breath, through feeling your body on the bed or in the chair, just really slowing down. Taking it a step further is to drop into the emotion, probably into the fear. Just allow yourselves to feel it a little bit. It probably usually dissipates quite quickly if we can name the emotion and be in it. There's some really good sleep apps that can help. Back on the phone, I know, but Calm has some great sleep stuff. Just either some music or sounds or some mindfulness practices that help you come into your body and soothe yourself back to sleep. Lots of strategies.
And just so that you're sure you're not alone, if you were to start a Zoom group at 3 a.m., you'll have many people join you. It's a collective experience.
Yeah, all of us.
Now.
Yep.
It's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
That's essentially it. I think that people are being shy today and not asking lots of questions. So we might just keep this first one short and sweet, unless you have some closing thoughts for everyone.
Could I just ask one more question? Because this is something that came up from one of you, is that people tend to, when they are struggling and they're in anxiety, they tend to think, I need to go see a mental health professional. I need to get an appointment. And one of you made the point that that's not always necessarily the best route for you. So can you speak just for a minute or two before we wrap about how to use your circles to be your support?
Yes, connected, it's everything. Again, I want to quickly make the point, there is such a thing as normal anxiety, and there is such a thing as pathological anxiety. And one of the easiest ways to think about it is one affects you to such an extent that you cannot function normally. The other one is an experience that we're going through, that all of us are going through, that's uncomfortable, but somehow you can continue functioning in the different capacities. So that's normal. It's about reaching out. It's about connecting. It's about acknowledging that and being aware of that, being accepting of that. That to me is very essential. And that ties right into mindfulness role.
Yeah, you're right. What I was coming up for me was like, I think we want people to feel comfortable connecting with their family physicians or other health supports that they have, because just to reassure people, the physicians on the coast are still available to support you. And mental health is something that's integral to all of us. So sometimes people are afraid to call in because they think it's not important. We really want to encourage you to access the resources that are around you. And perhaps our greatest resource right now is our friendships and the people that we know, and connecting with those that we trust. And we can never know just how small conversations with each other can make a tremendous difference. I've noticed it with the colleagues that I work with. We're finding ways to meet with each other and support each other, with neighbors, with being kind to the grocer that's working extra hard to supply us with food, and actually doing that with each other. So there's lots of novel ways we might move forward, and lots of great relationships we might both foster and even ignite that didn't exist before. And we really hope that you can access that resource, which is tremendous within our community.
I have one other aspect I want to add to this, and I know we're really short on time here. I have clients in their stories in my head right now as I think about people who are really isolated before this happened, who don't feel like they have places to go and connect. And so I worry about folks like them. And so I want us to think about, as a community, how to reach out, how to be more creative, to form places of support in groups. Maybe it's on Zoom, maybe it's at the end of your block where you're 20 feet apart, but waving at each other and making eye contact. I think we really need to think about those who are isolated in our communities and find ways to connect with people when we wouldn't normally. Who's on your block? Who's in your community? Who's in your church? Is there a family in the school who you think is really alone? How can we reach out to people to form those places of support? We're more resilient than we think. As human beings, we really, really are. And so to activate that in ourselves, particularly for people who are at a disadvantage or more vulnerable right now, is a really beautiful thing. And then that sparks our own resilience as well. Yeah.
Lovely thought to end on, to give us that positive note of optimism. And Jane, you have a page of resources you would like to talk us through before we say goodbye to all these lovely people.
Sure. Thanks for asking. We will have posted on our website and as well on the YouTube channel a number of resources that each one of our speakers has recommended, and not to overload everyone with them, but just a few simple places to go for more information for assistance. And as well, next week when we do COVID anxiety managing emotions, we'll be going a bit deeper on the 14th of April at 2:00, and we'll have again more resources for people to explore as they have time and see fit.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. This has been a fabulous beginning to a series that will go on for who knows how long. Wishing everybody a really lovely Easter weekend, and we will reconvene next Tuesday to continue to support each other and breathe together. Thanks very much.